This is a video idea from a YouTube channel called Royal Nonesuch Show. It featured a young man at the time who did all sorts of experiments involving firearms. This video is going to touch on the subject and what material testing is, material science, and destructive testing. Will a real PVC pipe work as a 12-gauge barrel or shotgun, and will it explode? 2015, January 14th, on the Royal Nonesuch, episode 29. He demonstrated the dangers of using PVC pipe as a gun barrel and said, "Do not attempt this." His whole channel got taken away because he would unabashedly and seemingly fearlessly do these tests. There's a lot of quick cuts, and he always made sure he did it safely. But he did not use formal procedures. He did everything at a gun range because it's the only way he would be able to do this in most cases, or on a hunk of property he owned where he had his own gun range. He also concentrated on doing things in such a way that if they did blow up, what he did is he based it on what was the maximum distance any projectile could go. And he did those tests off screen to show really what range he needed. And then he decided, I'll just do everything literally in the middle of the property I have access to, where I can make sure no one's there, and just make sure there's a lot of trees, and the intervening trees would stop anything and be moving, and the maximum speed of the items, he even quoted once, was less than 60 miles an hour. So unless it was a fairly heavy piece of metal or lead, it wasn't going to do anything. Not anything serious. Well below liability level, which, if you're not aware of it, the guy who ran the channel became a ATF recognized federal firearms licensed person to do experiments that included him being legally allowed to build temporarily a machine gun for testing purposes. So we're going to talk about this. Now, do not attempt this, and the video used to be up showing you what would happen. Now, things that shotguns have been made out of: high strength steel, braided barrels that are made out of, it might just as well be wire, made to make them look pretty. Watered steel looking things, railroad metal ground up and turned into it. Aluminum, tin, zinc, brass has been used in the past to make anything from cannons all the way down to small rifles and pistols. The key about these things is that they have a mechanical limit where non-elastic deformation occurs. That means instead of it expanding and contracting elastically, it expands and gets stuck. It bulges the barrel, or it causes a permanent misalignment of parts or whatever. And even when the material is too weak, hypothetically, to handle it, it does. Now I'm going to bring up something pretty quickly here. Pipe guns based on Schedule 40 pipe. This is something you see on the internet. This is the actual burst pressure, which is the one you're working with. Sudden mechanical shock that's tolerated, or barely tolerated, by pipe in general. Schedule 40 pipe that's 3/4 inch has a 12,900 psi burst pressure. It's nearly 13,000 pounds per square inch. Schedule 80 is even higher, 17,600 psi. This is the type that has a bore diameter that's 0.74 inches. Normal shotguns that are 12 gauge are supposed to be about 73 caliber, 0.73 inches. This is overbore, but still very close to the standard bore diameter you find in a Mossberg Shockwave and other commercially produced shotguns. Schedule 80 3/4 inch pipe is the one I tell people, if you're going to do this, make the barrel out of that. You can do it two ways. One, you can put a section of Schedule 80, put a coupler on it, and then screw it on there, and then make a kind of a funnel so that you can fire the cartridge through it. This is for test barrels. We're not talking about building a real gun. You point it into the ground, into a hole in the ground, and you put it into the hole in the ground and set it off. The idea is you're making a gun out of this because it's cheap. You can do the tests, and it'll work, and it will give you accurate data. Safer than that, and legitimately usable in a barrel, is also do the Schedule 80 and then bore out a chamber at 3.5 inches or whatever you need using a 13/16 drill bit. Now, am I telling you to do this? No. Just go buy a barrel off eBay for $50. It's designed to do this. Don't buy an older barrel. Don't buy a broken barrel. Don't buy one of the braided barrels that look really pretty. They blow up too easy. Always, and I don't care what anybody says, always use the thing that's less likely to blow up. So what did Royal Nonesuch YouTube channel do for testing steel barrels? He built gun barrels out of Schedule 40, which is only rated to almost 1,300 pounds per square inch, and tried to blow them up and failed. He did it with long and short barrels. He did it with ridiculous overcharge. He did it with bore obstructions. They don't blow up. That video is almost impossible to find. It's a destructive testing video. I had a copy of it and I lost it. Him being removed from YouTube for a bullshit reason when he's literally a federal firearms licensee, that was a detriment. That was a bad thing. That reduced, that made the world less of a useful place, in my opinion. The fact that his videos are almost impossible to find makes it even worse. Now, let's talk about the PVC pipe. If you're not aware of it, I'll give you the burst pressure for PVC pipe. Schedule 80 or Schedule 40, depending on how it's marked at your local store, will fit a cartridge without modification. Schedule 80 type isn't going to be as squeezed down as much. They make the plastic tubing thinner than the similar ones for water pipe that are steel. Only 2,000 or 1,500 PSI rating. That's it. But in every case that someone builds one of these things for testing, they put it inside of a 1-inch Schedule 40 pipe. 1-inch Schedule 40 pipe is rated to 12,000 PSI or more. 12-gauge SAAMI specs are 11,000 PSI up to 14,000. So unless you're using a magnum load, just the outer pipe is enough PSI to keep you from being hurt. If you make it literally impossible for the back end of it to blow off. It's not the barrel. It's the receiver that's taking the pressure because it's a completely cylindrical receiver. Now that means, yes, you can add them together if you use a Schedule 40 pipe that's 1 inch and 3/4 inch to make one of these things. You have 12,900 plus 12,100, or 27,000 PSI max out. Is that right? No, excuse me. 25,000 PSI burst pressure. You'd literally have to exceed the burst pressure for a cartridge you'd never be able to cram into it. And someone did that. Someone wanted to see what the destructive testing rate was. They took the propellant and projectiles for 5 shotgun cartridges that were 3.5-inch magnums, stuck it in one of these and blew it up. It was a pipe bomb with a bore obstruction jammed into it for 3 feet. They used a 5-foot piece of tubing. Guess who did it? I didn't even get to see the video before the channel went away. Royal Nonesuch showed that just using this dog shit methodology from hardware stores was literally able to tolerate shit you can't do with a real shotgun you buy from the store. It's tougher than a normal gun. It's cheaper. It's safer. That, I think, is a message no one wanted in the gun industry. That you're better off just building one yourself. Think about it. At one time, electric cars were something you tinkered with and made. And there was a definitive attempt to get rid of them. A real one. A real conspiracy. By automakers. Because they didn't want to have electric cars be something they had to compete with. Because the batteries were getting better. But long before that happened, people figured out, just make the car better. Just do a better design. A better design that requires less gas for mileage. Then just put electric car equipment in it. Suddenly, you're running it off the electrical system, and it's just barely practical for what most people use a car for. Going back and forth to work. The car you do as your daily driver to work, there are very few people who live so far away from where they work that wouldn't work with an electric car, and you know it. And the automotive industry knew that and actively campaigned against it. That's why they also got rid of trains, electric trains, and normal, trains running on fuel. Electric trolleys competed with selling cars in cities, so they kiboshed it. It's not some conspiracy theory. It's literally, it's this close to being a confirmed fact about history. They switched over to gasoline buses, which, if you're not aware, it really was better, honestly. It's more versatile. It can go on the same roads. You don't have to put in special infrastructure. But the marketing of trolleys and light rail being communism That is part of a conspiracy theory to keep you from having shit that makes life massively improved. Keeping people miserable and chasing a carrot is extremely important for the people who are selling the carrots. Or at least you think they're selling you carrots. They're just getting the work out of you. But again, let's talk about Royal Nonesuch's experiment with PVC pipe. Again, there was a commercially marketed aluminum barrel shotgun. There have been guns made out of zinc, copper, tin, and some of them were cannons. They didn't last very long, but they would work a couple of times. And they were not unsafe if you used a specific level of intensity to them. Brass cannons are all over the planet. So let's talk about the materials testing that he did with a PVC pipe. Since we can't watch it, I can discuss it. Here's what happened. He found out that unless you did a bore obstruction, every shell could fire out of it as long as it was in a certain depth of that 1-inch pipe. That, again, the 1-inch pipe is taking the pressure. You could just have the shell wrapped in tape. He even did that once and shove it in one. You could have it inside of a wooden tube. It didn't matter what it was made out of as long as it didn't give too much. And if it did give too much, it would just damage it. It's, again, inside of a 1-inch Schedule 40 pipe that's rated for more than you're going to use unless it's a 3-inch Magnum. And even then, they underestimate that burst pressure. It didn't pop anyway. So what was taking the pressure for the first 4.5 inches, 1 inch longer than the maximum length shell, is the outer pipe. Yes, the plastic will degrade. It gets corroded, destroyed. But this is the funny thing about it. He mentioned during the video. Shotgun shells that use corrosive material, like gunpowder. Gunpowder is corrosive, not smokeless powder. Or use remade primers. Or whatever. The corrosive material doesn't affect plastic. It only affects the steel. He even made a comment about that with his own pipe guns. What this showed was, something that people didn't want to talk about, was that you could get away with doing this. And you'd have a plastic shotgun. A plastic barrel gun is illegal in the United States because it's an untraceable firearm, unless you include a certain number of ounces of steel. That receiver tube at 4.5 inches was exactly the right amount because of the ass end of it being a big, end cap with a bunch of metal in it. It wasn't illegal. It worked. You'd never want to fire it. He wouldn't fire it. But he showed that no matter how weak the material is, it's not the barrel, it's the receiver taking the pressure. If you design it right, you can under-design the barrel, and it'll still work well enough. I mean, obviously, you can't put choke tubes in it. It's not going to last. And the same thing goes the other way. A plastic flare gun with a completely uniform steel cartridge in it that goes all the way from one end to the other, acting essentially as the entire barrel and gun, would work. People have made those. They have been rated by the ATF, even though that's absolutely not illegal. Because it implies you can make an untraceable plastic flare gun, because they are, into a weapon. Except the cartridge you build essentially ends up weighing enough that it sets off a metal detector and fits the requirements. Now we're going to fast forward. 3D printed guns using cartridges that are completely made out of steel and effectively are the entire barrel with rifling. But the ATF makes that against the rules, or there's some, ITAR rule. No, it's the gun industry not wanting people to make ultralight, single-use guns that are revolvers or whatever that fire 6 shots, and then, you can take out the cylinder and replace it. There's a paintball gun that does exactly the same thing that's on the market. It's the same thing. But they were trying to keep it from being put out. Yeah. So you can look up all the information I just given you based on PVC pipe data and also 1977 pipe burst pressure, which obviously it's improved since then, and I give links to it. None of these are flaggable links, but we'll see what happens. Again, I'm not advocating you do this. I'm just showing you that depending on how you build it, it doesn't matter how strong some of the parts are. And more importantly, some people knew that and did not like it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with it.